Hi, my name is Daniel Mezei. I'm the screenwriter of the feature film, The Inner District. I'm also producing this film, and I acted in this film. I'm going to be talking about the screenwriting of this picture. So, if you haven't watched the acting commentary track yet, go ahead and listen to that first. I'm going to be talking about basically my motivations for writing this story, and I won't make too much reference to the acting in it. So I wrote a book in 2006. When I was living in Prague in the Czech Republic as an expat, as an expatriate. I wrote the book. It was called We Are the New Bohemians, the Post-Communist Collection. I wrote this story in it. It was called Jiří Schulz's Astonishing 2010 Directive. And basically, and I talk about this a lot in a lot of areas on our social media outposts. It was a story about one part of the city of Prague breaking away from the European Union. There had been a lot of discussion in those years about disgruntled member states of the European Union wanting to break away from Brussels. And I thought it was really interesting to describe a scenario in the city of Prague where, it's being surrounded by a river, that the old part of the city would break away and partition itself off from the EU proper, because the rest of the country would want to revert to this kind of what I called the revanchist, or just revert to a kind of a nationalist, fascist type of entity. And the inner part of the inner district, or the inner city of Prague, would remain free and part of the EU, and they would partition itself off from this fascist part. And I thought it would be interesting to explore, how this particular jurisdiction would function, and then basically how the people would interact with each other, the government of this place, and how it would supply itself, and how it would basically, do battle all the time with this much larger surrounding enemy. And so Juliane Block and I got together in 2011, and we were talking about doing a project together, and I had this book that I'd written and this story that won an award back in 2006. And I was flown to London, and I kind of gave a speech in front of the Czech and Slovak ambassadors about it. And I said, hey, I have, this story. Why don't we kind of adapt it? I tried to do something with it in 2008, but it just we didn't have the mojo for it. And as luck would have it, and as situations happened, as the relationships developed, Juliane and I just jumped into this with both feet. And basically we thought it would be wise of us to introduce some of the more difficult concepts of the story through what's called webisodes, as opposed to, doing what most novice screenwriters do, which is telling a lot of expositional detail and wasting a lot of screen time. So we thought, as a way of kind of introducing the concept before we actually went to camera, we thought that we would discuss some of the more perhaps difficult to grasp backstory elements, and this is one of them. This is, of course, me acting as what's known as a zoner, somebody that comes from outside of the inner district and infiltrates the inner district, and basically the penalties that somebody who comes from the outside faces, and how the law enforcement of the inner district protects itself. It's kind of this haves and have-nots, and we've read about this in so many other books before, whether it's Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, or 1984 by George Orwell, or P.D. James and his book Children of Men. There's so many different variants of this, and Berlin is a perfect city for this kind of a story. So that's basically my motivations, the impetus for writing this particular story. And of course, carry on to part 2, and you'll see some more excellent acting by our director. That's her name, Juliane Block. And thanks again for listening to the Screenwriter's Commentary for Webisode 1, Part 1, and enjoy the rest of the stuff.